Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out tonight. It's a great turnout, and I'm so excited to get into my presentation. When I was planning tonight, I thought about, what might be most relevant. And instead of making this super clinical and trying to talk way above everyone, I look at my job as a dietitian and nutritionist to try and make nutrition, which I think a lot of people have a pretty good idea what foods are better and maybe which foods aren't so good, and take what you know and help your day-to-day actions line up a little bit closer. So when I counsel people in my private practice, one of the key things I really focus on are habits. And so with habits, our actions day to day determine how healthy we stay, our body shape, our body size, our quality of life, our mental state. So if you can focus on what you can control, which is your day-to-day habits, then the things that often frustrate us that are a little bit harder to control, like our weight, will follow our behaviors. So I'm tonight really going to spend some time talking about behaviors as opposed to BMI charts and where your weight should be and health parameters, because those are kind of big picture things that doctors might wave around, but it's a little bit harder to specifically know what you need to do to influence those in a positive way. So I thought I'd start out with a pop quiz. Normally I have my audience write down what they had yesterday. But in the sake of time tonight, to keep things on schedule, what I'll have you do is just take a second in your mind and think back to yesterday. So a normal Tuesday in September, think back to what your day was like from morning to night. What time did you get up? Did you make yourself breakfast? Did you grab breakfast on the run? Was it just a coffee? What did you have at the start of the day? Think about maybe mid-morning. Did you stop and have a snack? Were you busy? Did you eat it all in that point of the day? How about lunch? Throughout the afternoon, did anyone hit that mid-afternoon dip where they get a little bit more tired, a little bit less motivated, a little bit more sluggish? And then think back to last night's dinner. And I really want you to think about dinner for a second. Think about, what was on that plate. Also think about where you had dinner. Was it at the kitchen table? Was it on the couch in front of the TV? Was there a distraction in the background? And then last but not least, evening snacking. Did you go back into the kitchen after dinner? Was there a little trip to the fridge or the pantry? What might that have been? Now, normally, what I'd have you do...
Why did you bring that up?
I know, because it's so relevant to how your body feels today. It's totally relevant. So what I'd normally do next is say, okay, from everything you've written down, pass that sheet to your neighbor. If your reaction is, oh no, that is not a good thing, I don't want my neighbor to see what I had, then that's exactly where we're going to focus on for tonight. Because what happened yesterday was the reality of what's inside your body today and what's influencing how your cells are growing, how your body feels, how you're able to heal yourself. And so what happened yesterday is incredibly relevant. And so I like to focus on that because with nutrition, we tend to have sort of this rosy picture in our mind that we're pretty good. I know that vegetables are good for me. I know that chips and cookies and junk food probably isn't so good. Got it, A+ in nutrition. But as I said, your habits really matter. So what you do day to day matters a lot more than a big giant diet scheme in your head. And I find when I work with people one-on-one, I have a lot of all or nothings that I tend to work with. They go out so hard, so aggressively when they want to change their nutrition habits. They've got their diet to a T. They're not going to drink caffeine. They're never going to eat out. Everything's going to be homemade, local, organic. Sounds wonderful in that little thought bubble in our head. The reality is the effort it takes to maintain such a big grand scheme for nutrition is so unattainable that ultimately people burn out, fizzle, and their nutrition habits slip back to what they were. So it's more important that you focus on little things you can control every day than trying to plan the perfect picture. Because there's never going to be a perfect time to eat better. There's never going to be a perfect time to start exercising the way you want to get to that weight. So it's about finding what you're capable of doing in the situation that you find yourself. So that's what we're going to go through. My very favorite tool when I coach with nutrition, and I do believe every person's diet should be individualized, and there's no magic diet that works for everyone. So we might tweak this a little bit if you're a vegan. We might tweak this a little bit if you feel like you need a little bit more protein. But I'm going to use this as a starting base because it's so simple and it's really, really powerful for checking in with your own nutrition. This is what I call the healthy plate. You can see that it's pretty much 50% veggies, 25 or a quarter of the plate of a lean protein, and then about 25% of the plate of a complex carb or starch. I want you to go back to your dinner yesterday. Show of hands, you don't have to answer specifically what your dinner was, excuse me, who remembered what their meat was from last night's dinner? So if that was the first thing you remembered, show of hands. Who remembered their starch first? So maybe they had pasta or rice. Who, when they recalled their dinner, the first thing they thought of was their vegetable? So the minority. So this is the first little tweak or change I'd like to recommend to your diet. Very rarely do we plan our dinner around our vegetable intake. But especially from a cancer prevention and cancer treatment standpoint, these guys have so many important plant chemicals that keep our cells and our body really healthy. So everyone knows vegetables are good for us. But how do we get this to happen a little bit more easily day to day? Well, here's a couple little habits or tweaks I'd like to recommend. The first thing I usually suggest is change the order that you put food on your plate. Most of us grab, the protein piece first, then we maybe scoop on some rice or mashed potatoes or pasta, and then maybe we have a little bit left over for some vegetables. Well, if we put those guys on last, what usually happens is this becomes our protein, or at least in the restaurant industry, that's what you're going to get served. Then our big glob of starch goes on, and then we might have this itty-bitty corner left over for vegetables, but that's about it. So if you let vegetables own their territory and you always look to put them on first, I promise you that little change, you're going to eat that little bit more vegetables throughout the year just by getting them on first. Another way that helps with this is to actually try to increase the variety of vegetables within the meal. So if you go for 2 different colors or 2 different kinds as a minimum, now it feels a little bit easier to have 50%. So if I did, say, steamed broccoli and a little bit of, say, steamed carrots to go with that, it doesn't feel as overwhelming as half a plate of broccoli or half a plate of carrots. So we can actually trick our minds into eating more when we have more variety, more color, more crunch, more texture, more flavor. And so that 2-color rule really helps make the vegetable intake go up. Another thing I like to suggest, and this is another little pop quiz you can answer in your own mind, is if I came to each and every one of your houses right now, opened up your refrigerator and said, I really would like some vegetables as a snack. Can you hand it to me right away? If you have the bin or a container where there's cut up vegetables that are washed, in visible sight, ready to go, you've passed my pop quiz. If you'd have to pull them out of your crisper drawer, get a cutting board, wash them off, chop them up, then you didn't pass my pop quiz. The crisper drawer is great for killing vegetables. I call it the Slimer. We buy our vegetables with really, really good intentions. We're out of the grocery store making good choices. We bring them home. Into the crisper drawer they go. And about 2.5 weeks later, they come out a little bit dented, a little bit rotten, a little bit slimy, and we feel bad that we wasted money. So here's another habit or little tweak to change into your grocery shopping routine. When you grocery shop, you're probably in the habit of putting everything away when you come home. You wouldn't leave milk on the counter and yogurt sitting out and then the bread away. You put everything away, 5-10 minutes of chores. Well, why not add 5 more minutes? You're already in sort of chore mode as it is, and take out a cutting board, a knife, wash your veggies. I usually let them dry on a tea towel as I put my other food away, and then I just make sure when I wrap up, I cut my vegetables, get them in that big kind of glass container, and it's the first thing I see when I open up my fridge. It doesn't take too much work, and the way I kind of sold myself on doing this in undergrad was I used to just say, okay, 1 iPod song. So I'd play 1 song on my computer, listen to a favorite song, kind of get in the mood, and after 5 minutes of listening to the song, usually I would just finish the job. But I said minimum 1 song on the, on the radio or on the computer, and that completes the chore. And yeah, sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 8 minutes, but I promise you that's the best 5 to 10 minutes of your week. Because now, it's gonna save you when you're a little bit lazy. So let's do, who likes pizza as an example? It's one of my favorite foods. So if I could, I'd eat pizza every night, but I know I can't because I wouldn't be able to stay healthy and get my cells everything that they need. So pizza doesn't naturally fit this very well. And I'm not ever expecting perfection whenever I talk to an audience about nutrition. Because if you set yourself up for perfection, you're setting yourself up for failure. But if you ask yourself for progress and to just be a little bit better than the day before, or maybe earlier in the day, then you're going to actually get somewhere. So say it's a Friday night, I don't feel like cooking, my grocery shopping isn't going to happen till Saturday, and there's not a lot to eat, so I'm going to pick up a pizza for dinner. Not really close to this off the start. Well, if I do have that vegetable bucket still in my fridge, and I follow my rule of veggies on the plate first, I might start out by maybe grabbing a celery stick, maybe 3 or 4 baby carrots, a couple cucumber circles, maybe a grape tomato, and maybe 1 little red pepper slice. All right, there's half the plate covered, not so bad. Then I might start with 1 or 2 pieces of pizza, and if I'm really hungry, that's going to slow me down for maybe 3, 4, 5 pieces of pizza with no vegetables. So it's not that I've had a perfect dinner, but maybe I didn't have quite as much of the high calorie, higher fattening fast food, and I still got a little bit of fiber, a little bit of nutrition with the vegetables. So in my opinion, that's a win. It wasn't perfect, but it was still progress over just picking up something fast and convenient. That vegetable bucket can also help you. Say you want to come home and make a really quick kind of stir fry. Well, it's not so much of a chore now because you just can take out that container, chop up a few vegetables a little bit finer, and maybe throw something together in a wok nice and quick. So all that is doing is basically for the nights that you're a little bit more tired, a little bit more beaten down, a little bit more stressed out, you've got an option that's going to help you keep your nutrition a little bit higher. Even if I'm going to go out for dinner and say meet some friends for a dinner, I can even have a few of those before I go out to a restaurant, not knowing if the restaurant is going to basically provide that half plate of veggies, and at least I got a little bit into me before I went out to eat. So this works well, especially if you're back and forth at the hospital or you have lots of appointments, because it gives you a really quick access to throw some in a little container and maybe take them with you. Even if, say, you have to buy your lunch at a cafeteria in a hospital setting, you can still bring that little container of vegetables with you, and your nutrition just got that little bit better. So that's the first thing. The other part of the plate you can see is that the protein isn't nearly as massive as what a restaurant might serve us. So it's not, unfortunately, an 8 to 10 ounce piece of steak. But protein is really, really important, especially when you have cancer. We need that for our cells to regenerate and grow. So we want to have a source of protein, but we don't want the whole dinner to be fixated around protein. And then carbs are kind of a scary thing right now when you read about them on the internet. I think they're probably the most misunderstood macronutrient. The way I like to explain them, especially to my first year class when I teach at Western, is I talk a lot about food working together, kind of like the parts of a car. So if you visualize a car, we need parts. So that's actually what protein is to our body. Protein helps us basically build, grow, regenerate tissue. So it's part of our muscles. Our hair is actually protein, our fingernails. We need antibodies from our white blood cells. Those are all protein. So protein is physically the stuff that we're made up of. And it's also like the mechanic of the car that kind of helps hold and put it all together. But once you build your car, it doesn't just drive on its own. You have to put something in it to make it go. And that's what gasoline is for. And that's basically what carbs are for the body. They're the preferred form of gas that our cells like to drive off of. But just like at the pump, there's the cheap price gas, there's the medium price, and then there's a really expensive premium fuel. Same kind of idea within the carb family. There's the sludgy, not good for us carbs. And this is, again, probably common sense to most of you, where you know that white bread and white rice and Pop-Tarts and Frosted Flakes and candy and ice cream and cookies and chocolate and all the things that taste lovely in this world are down in that sludgy category. They give you that insulin spike, and they usually make you feel really crashed and bottomed out after you eat them. The middle price gas pump, it's what I sort of consider a healthier version of what's in the number 1 category, but it would still be a little bit processed. So things like whole wheat bread, whole wheat pasta, minimally processed whole grain crackers, those kind of fall into that middle category. They're definitely nutritious, and they're definitely more nutritious than the white version, but then there's this whole other premium category of gasoline. And the 3 out of 3 carbohydrates, the top tier, are things that if I sent you on a nature scavenger hunt to a field, to a farm, to a forest, you could bring me back something edible exactly as you found it. So that might be wild rice, or that might be a sweet potato, or squash. It might be buckwheat or barley or steel-cut oats. So there's no such thing, to my knowledge, as a whole wheat penne bush. I couldn't go out and go pick my whole wheat penne for dinner. But I could go to Asia and come back with a little jar of brown rice if I wanted. Or I could go to my friend's farm and go get some sweet potatoes and pull them out of the ground and make that dinner. So the best carbohydrates, the ones that basically give us the most sort of long-term sustained energy without that spike, are the ones that are going to be 100% unprocessed. So brown rice, wild rice, buckwheat, barley, steel-cut oats, sweet potatoes, squash, all of those guys would be really, really high quality. Here's the good news for people that are anti-carb or scared to eat carb. When you focus on that premium top-tier category, you can't really binge on them. Think about this for a second. Have you ever lost control eating pots and pots of quinoa back to back, where you just kept making quinoa on the stove and you couldn't stop yourself? Probably not. Who here craves lentils and just goes crazy, bowl after bowl of lentils? Probably doesn't happen. Who here would eat 5 sweet potatoes baked out of the oven in a row? Wouldn't happen. But if I took those potatoes and I turned them into potato chips and I threw you on a couch and I put on a movie for a few hours, it's now a whole different story how many potatoes you might eat back to back.
Now you're talking.
I know. So here's the tough thing with carbs. When we put them into that lowest category, that number one, that bottom tier, then our ability to control our portion size with those carbohydrates is very difficult. It's really easy to overeat chips and cookies and candy and ice cream and all the stuff that has sugar and white flour because it tastes so darn good. But the threes, the top tier category of carbohydrate gas, because they're so high fiber, because they're so high nutrient, and because they're actually very bland, unless you get creative with how to flavor them with herbs and spices and low sodium seasonings, those guys, they naturally tell your body, stop eating. So brown rice, quinoa, sweet potatoes, squash, lentils, they're going to give you a feedback loop going, you know what, that was probably enough, stop right here. But the white stuff doesn't really ever give you that stopping point until you've gone way past what you need. So I wouldn't actually encourage you to go on a low carb or anti-carb diet. In the long run, it doesn't work. And think about it going back to that car example. If you tried to get to your appointments and you didn't ever fill your car up with gas, eventually there's going to come a point where your car isn't going to drive when that tank gets down to 0. So then we have a backup system to try and move our car when we absolutely starve ourselves of carbs. We now get our mechanic, the protein, to get behind the car and start to push it down the street. Now your mechanic can do that for you for a day. He can maybe push you around for a week, maybe even a few weeks at the most. But eventually that mechanic is going to get really irritated with you that you're not putting gas into your car. And so he or she is going to push you to the closest gas station and go, fill up with gas. I don't know why you're trying to do this to me, but go get some gasoline. And so what that translates into in a food scenario is people tend to binge on white carbohydrates and sugar when they haven't had carb all day long. So as a really good example of where this can go wrong, I often see people when they're trying to eat healthy eat like this. Okay, I'll do a big salad for lunch, I'll put my tuna or my chicken or my hard-boiled eggs. Good for me, I'm eating really well. And yes, you are to some extent. But without that carb in the middle of the day, suddenly I can cover up their food diary at the end of the night and go, now what did you get into after dinner? I bet you I'm going to see some cookies or some ice cream or some potato chips. And sure enough, I can usually lift up my hand for the second part of the day. Oh, there's some chocolate in the evening, or there's some potato chips while watching TV. So the brain remembers how much gas you've given it. And it does a lot better when you give it a little squirt of that really high premium gas each of the 3 meals than you are to try to go really high vegetable, just protein, low carb, because eventually your body will make you pay for that low carb, usually in the form of eating something that isn't so good for you, either later on in the evening, or for a lot of people it's their weekends. They really fall off Saturday, Sunday. So, I don't know how much that relates to you, but I'm just sharing from sort of practical experience that I find when we can get lunches and dinners closer to this, people tend to have pretty healthy weights. They feel very satisfied. They don't feel deprived. They don't feel like they're starving themselves, but they're getting more of those high fiber, high nutrient foods and still an appropriate amount of what else they need. And as a quick aside, starchy vegetables. Every vegetable is going to count in this freebie category except those 4 on the screen. So potatoes, corn, so both sweet and white potatoes, peas and squash, they all have a slightly higher starch content. So they would be in exchange of a grain. Yes? All squash. Yeah, they just have a little bit higher carbohydrate content. Squash is an absolutely amazing vegetable. I would very much encourage you to eat squash. But if you're just having, say, squash and potatoes and, say, chicken for dinner, then you've actually had your entire meal from that bottom part of the plate. So we want to get maybe something that's a dark green veggie or something else to go with it just to round out the meal. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's habit number 1 with a few little tweaks that maybe you can take away for your own life. Put the veggies on your plate first. Try and create a veggie bucket where the food is washed and cut up and ready to go, and just making it more accessible. Now you take your good intentions and your day-to-day actions, and they line up a little bit better. Yes?
Every meal we have a big salad. Is that classed as your vegetable?
Yes, it is. Yeah, so that would all count towards that freebie veggie in there. So the more stuff you can put in there, the better. Number 2 is a little bit about portion size, tying into that healthy plate. And this is especially important for the women in the room because we are at a distinct disadvantage when it comes to portion size. Restaurants tend not to feed for the average female body size. They tend to feed for a larger male. Now here's the thing. You probably don't have the exact same hand size as your male partner, but what we know from research is that over the course of a marriage or common law partnership, women tend to gain weight a little bit faster than the male counterparts do. And one part of this is we go, okay, chicken breast for me, chicken breast for you, salad, salad, rice, rice, okay dear, dinner's ready, and you sit down almost eating an identical portion, say to your partner or your spouse. Now if you look at your hand, especially if you came with a spouse or a partner, line up your hands together and see how close you actually are to your male counterpart. If they're not the same size, you shouldn't be eating the same amount of food. So I like this next tool because I really discourage calorie counting and tracking and really kind of measuring it to a T. That makes food super mathematical and it makes you a little bit bonkers in the head. It's just too much to keep track of. Instead, I like to give people a guideline and then tell them to really listen to their stomach. Your stomach is key. If you're eating mindfully, your body should be giving you feedback. When it's hungry, it wants a little bit more. And when it's not so hungry, eat a little bit less. But if I design you the most perfect meal plan and you follow it to a T and never listen to your body, then sometimes you might be overeating and sometimes you might be undereating and we haven't quite figured out the right relationship. So for veggies, what we're looking for is basically kind of 2 flat handfuls. So for the guys in the room that have really big hands, I expect more veggies going into your body. From a starch standpoint, if you're very active, I usually say about the size of your fist. If you're looking to change your weight to go down, then about 3/4 of the size of your fist. So I apologize if anyone here works for Eastside Mario's, but they make a really great example. When I go there and if I have a baguette or 2 and their pasta dish, I am well over, for instance, that 3/4 to 1 fist. But at the same time, if I see someone that just does their salad and their protein for lunch and there isn't that little bit of starch, they often will pay for that a little bit later. So your fist is a pretty good approximation, 1/2, 3/4 to a full fist, depending on your activity level. And that should be what your starch piece is of your plate. The protein is where most people probably serve themselves a little bit too much. I want you to look at the palm of your hand and about the thickness of your baby finger. So it's not the meaty part of the palm of your hand. It's more like a thinner piece, say like tilapia, a little thinner piece of fish. So if you have a fatter piece of steak or chicken, for instance, then the surface area would just be a little bit smaller than the palm of your hand. Now if you think to last night's dinner, for those who remembered what their meat was, how close were you to those 3 portion sizes? 2 handfuls of veggies, a fist or slightly smaller for your starch, and about the palm of your hand, thickness of your baby finger for protein.
Is 2 out of 3 pretty good?
It's a start, and progress versus perfection. So it's good that you had some of those in line, but maybe one might have been a little bit too much or a little bit too little. You'll also see just a little tip of the fingertip for fat. So we don't want to be diet everything, fat-free, no fat. Healthy fat can play a really important part to our body's health. Just like with that car analogy, you want a little bit of oil. You need some lubrication inside your car. If you let your oil get bone dry, that's not good for the car to run. So we want a little bit of healthy added fat, things like olive oil or maybe the fat that's going to come in a salmon, for instance. So that's habit number 2. Check in with your hands. So the next time you eat at a restaurant, for instance, just because they're serving you things not in proportion doesn't mean you have to eat to the amounts that they've maybe suggested on your plate. See if you can approximate a little bit closer to that and maybe take a doggy bag home where you've packed up half the protein, maybe packed up some of the extra starch, and maybe you can add an extra serving of vegetables or get them to add a little bit more to your order and try and get that half plate covered. Okay, number 3 is especially important for cancer prevention and therapy and staying healthy afterwards. The more color you can get in your diet, the better for your body. Without going into the names of all the phytochemicals and which group gives you, what specific nutrients, what you're basically aiming for is every one of those colors over the course of the week. So reds, orange, yellows, that nice deep dark green family, the blue purples, as well as the whites. So things like cauliflower, onion, garlic, for instance. There's 2 colors that you ideally want to have every single day. Does anyone know what those 2 colors are? Green is absolutely one of those colors. There's a second color that goes with the green. Orange. Orange is the other one. Green is the nutrition powerhouse. They're all great, so I don't want to discredit the blue purples and the whites and the yellows, but they're all fantastic. But green especially is going to give you calcium, iron, magnesium, potassium. There's folate, vitamin K. The list goes on and on. Without really knowing and memorizing all those individual vitamins and minerals, just know that you get a great bang for your buck with the dark greens. You're going to get a lot of healthy nutrients for not a lot of calories from this family, plus a great source of fiber. What's interesting with the dark greens is that when you cook them, in some cases, you actually bring out the nutrition a little bit better. So for instance, cooked spinach has 4 times the iron content of a raw spinach salad. And the reason for that is when you cook some of the dark green vegetables, it softens the cell walls and it actually makes those nutrients more accessible to our digestive enzymes, and we better absorb the nutrients out of the food. So things like calcium and iron both go up when you cook your dark green vegetables. Raw is still great as well. I'm not against raw food, nor am I against cooking all foods. That variety piece of doing your foods both ways is really great, but especially for dark green, when you cook them, you get a little bit more nutrition out of the food. Yes?
Is that better cooked or raw?
You'll get a little bit more calcium and iron out of it cooked than raw form.
Same way.
Yeah, exactly. The orange vegetables and fruits, what these guys give you is actually something that's so powerfully connected to cancer. It has a nutrient called beta-carotene, and that is a precursor to vitamin A. Vitamin A is a huge antioxidant inside of our body, and the way that I like to think about vitamin A is think of it almost like little soldiers guarding us. So we're the nucleus of the cell, and we're the really important DNA that has to stay intact and protected. Now, if we have 10,000 soldiers around this school tonight, I'd feel pretty safe, pretty protected. And that would be eating orange vegetables and dark green vegetables daily. It kind of keeps replenishing our soldiers that stay on guard. Now, if I wasn't so great with my nutrition and I stopped this daily habit, it's kind of like our soldiers starting to die off. So we started at 10,000, and then maybe we only have 1,000, and then we're down to 500, and suddenly there's only 20 guys guarding the perimeter. Now I don't feel so secure. They can't guard every window, every door, and now our cells are more vulnerable to attack. So what these antioxidants do is they self-sacrifice to try and prevent our DNA from getting damaged from things in our environment. So smoking, sun exposure, pesticides, stress, chemicals, exercise even. The more that we can feed these antioxidants into our system, the more we keep that soldier population really healthy, the better protected our cells are, our lower likelihood therefore of having cancer coming back or getting it in the first place. So these colors are incredibly important, and the more you can get in, the better, and especially dark green and bright orange. So again, your own little pop quiz, your own little check-in. Go back to yesterday, Tuesday. Who here can remember eating a dark green? A few people. Who here also got an orange? And who did both? So got both green and orange. So some, but not the majority. So it's a place, and today's not over, Maybe you can even change the course of today where there's still a way to get, cantaloupe would count as a bright orange. So there's a bright orange ready and waiting for us. And maybe there's a dark green waiting at home that you can still get in if you haven't yet had it today. So progress, not perfection. Number 4, breakfast. Everyone has heard that probably breakfast is the most important meal of the day. But I find this is one where not everyone does this as well as they could. Part of where I find people struggle with their weight is if I put their calories on a teeter-totter, this is what they look like. Breakfast, middle of the day, dinner, evening snacking. And so they have way too many calories coming in at the end of the day and not enough calories coming in at breakfast, which, believe it or not, is setting you up to nighttime snack. So a lot of the time why people struggle with their evening cravings is not that they have bad willpower. It's not that they're bad people or they don't know what to do. It's actually that they didn't get a strong enough breakfast to set up a great foundation for the day. And the mistake most people do is they have it unbalanced or it's too small. So I'm not talking like Cora's breakfast here, go out and have like a giant buffet, bacon, eggs, toast, fruit, yogurt, everything. I'm usually asking for 3 parts to round out the breakfast. The first that a lot of people tend to start with is that starch. So again, if we're going for those top tier carbohydrates, maybe that's a bowl of homemade oatmeal. But it's not always realistic to go grind up some sweet potato and have that for breakfast, or go have some quinoa. So here might be where you might have a 2 at breakfast. Maybe it is in that middle carbohydrate category, some minimally processed high fiber cereal, whole wheat toast for instance, or whole wheat English muffin. So it doesn't have to be perfect 3 out of 3. It might be a minimally processed carbohydrate. Then we want to add some protein to that. Protein, to me, isn't really the bacon sausage. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. The better breakfast proteins are going to be things maybe like milk or a calcium-fortified milk alternative. Hard-boiled eggs, for instance. Maybe some all-natural peanut butter on your toast. Maybe some yogurt stirred in with some healthy cereal. So something that's going to give your body some protein and a little bit of satisfaction. And then ensure that you're getting at least some antioxidants by getting a fruit or a vegetable in. Now veggies, I don't really expect you to get up and face half a plate of salad for breakfast and leftover steak and rice unless you're really into leftovers. But even just a little piece of fruit or some berries or half a banana, a peach, a plum, half an apple, just something to get a little bit of fiber, a little bit of nutrition, some antioxidants into your body, and that makes a well-rounded breakfast. I find a lot of people don't wake up hungry. And if that applies to you and you just don't have the appetite for breakfast, it's usually because your dinners are so large and you snack in the evening, it crushes your appetite for the next morning. What you need to do to get yourself out of that is for about 2 to 3 weeks, you have to force a small amount of breakfast and force it to happen until your metabolism starts to want it. And you have to decrease your size of your dinner a little bit and work on increasing your breakfast. Now, if you are really not a breakfast person and you really have no appetite, then starting with all 3 is probably going to be too much. So maybe start with 1 part. I have clients that just start with a piece of fruit. They grab a banana and that's their breakfast. Is it complete? Is it all the way there? No, but I encourage them because it's a start. It's better than not having breakfast altogether. Then they might maybe add some peanut butter on that banana. Okay, great, we're getting at least some protein in. Or maybe they grab a little handful of nuts or a yogurt. Awesome, you've taken the next right step. And then they start to add maybe that complex carb, and they'll notice that their energy levels are better in the morning, they feel better in the afternoon, and they're not craving as much junk into the evening. But you have to be realistic. If you're not a breakfast eater, waking up to this is probably way too much food at once. So work your way up. Just like if you weren't a runner, you wouldn't start off by running your first marathon on day 1. You might run for 10 minutes around the block and do 1 minute on, 1 minute off and build up. So same thing if this isn't really your cup of tea at the moment. But definitely try to get it in if you can. I want to make a quick comment about smoothies. Does anyone here do a smoothie for breakfast? So a few people. They're pretty popular, they're convenient, they're quick. Smoothies have their plus and minuses. They're a great way to get a lot of fruits and veggies shoved into your body first thing. They're a little bit idiot-proof where you just put everything in a blender and throw it in a cup and off you go. So it doesn't take a lot of thinking. And it's pretty easy to get in a routine and just sort of know that that's going to be your breakfast. Smoothies are okay, but there's one little downside to them. The problem is when you blenderize your food, you actually just stole some work your body would have had to do to digest the food. So anytime that you chew, slowly eat and swallow your food, and then your stomach has to take another hour to a couple hours to break that food down further, you actually burn 5 to 15% of the calories in that food. Is just the process of digestion. The second you let a machine do the work for you, you're not burning as many calories. Now, depending on how strained that smoothie is and how little fiber made it through, so if you juice, for instance, you're losing a lot of that fiber, you're now increasing the sugar content, decreasing the satisfaction content, and not getting the benefits of the fiber. To me, juice and smoothies, to some extent, is kind of like taking the elevator when you could have taken the stairs. If you took the stairs every day up 10 flights to an apartment, you'd be a little bit leaner, you'd burn some calories. Yeah, you'd get there a little bit slower, but you got a little workout to your destination. That's what it's like to eat the whole food. When you blenderize it, you're still getting the nutrition, you're still getting to your destination, but you didn't have to work as hard to absorb it, and it happens a lot faster. So usually you'll get a higher glycemic spike after a smoothie or a juice than you do from eating the whole fruit. So I like to think of juice as only a once in a while option. And then smoothies aren't quite as bad as the juice because they contain a little bit of the fiber, but they still give you a higher spike than if you sat and ate the entire fruit. So with the smoothie, I like to think of them as a once in a while breakfast option as opposed to an everyday. Because again, I find when people start with the smoothie, maybe their calories are a bit too low, and then their dinners and evening snacks are a bit too big, and that balance is still off a little bit. So just something to think about. I wouldn't stop you from making a smoothie, but also think about other options to throw in there as well. Yeah?
Which is a better option, soy beverage or almond milk?
It depends what your goal is. A lot of people are very nervous about soy when they have cancer, if they've had breast cancer, because you read a lot on the internet about that. The only cancer patients that have to be very careful about soy are those that have an estrogen positive type of breast cancer, and usually their oncologist and cancer dietitian would talk to them about that. But in general, for the population, eating soy actually reduces your risk of cancer from what we've seen in the studies. Now, not all almond milks and soy milks are created equal. They're meant to copy what milk has, but legally there's no laws in Canada ordering what they have to fortify the beverage with. So a cup of milk has about 30% of your day's worth of calcium. It's fortified with 10% of your day's worth of vitamin A and about 45% of your day's worth of vitamin D, and gives you 9 grams of protein. So that's milk. Soy milk has usually about 8 grams of protein, usually will have the 30% calcium, and then it's brand specific whether they do the vitamin A and the vitamin D. Most brands I've seen do, but a couple don't. Almond milk is also nutritious. It usually will have it fortified to 30% calcium, but I've seen most almond milks lacking the vitamin A and the vitamin D. The other thing with almond milk, I'm not totally against it, depends what your goals are, is does anyone know how much protein is in 1 cup of almond milk? Has anyone looked on the label who drinks it? 1 gram. So when you think you're getting protein in your smoothie from almond milk, you're only getting 1 gram. If it was milk in the smoothie, it would be 9 grams, and if it was the soy milk, it would be 8 grams of protein. So it's very, very different in its protein content. That's not the end of the world if you're getting your protein from another source. But in your mind, if you think that's where your protein's coming from at breakfast, you're getting almost no protein, and it's not giving you what you might think. So for some people, the soy or the almond is a great option because it doesn't give them the digestive discomfort of lactose coming from the milk, and it makes perfect sense. But in other cases, if you're trying to get your protein intake up and using almond milk instead of milk or soy, you're not getting the protein at all that you think you are. So you have to look very carefully on the label.
What about, which would be a better option? Peanut butter or almond milk?
I like both. Here's my little philosophy on the nut family. When you think of healthy nuts, what nut comes to mind? There's usually 2 that people will say. Shout it out. Walnuts and almonds. Those 2 marketing boards have paid big, big bucks for you guys to spit those 2 answers out. So almonds, really high fiber, really high calcium. Awesome, love them. Walnuts, the highest omega-3 nut. Awesome, love it. But you know what? Peanuts are really high in protein. Sunflower seeds have the most vitamin E. Pumpkin seeds, especially if you're low iron, have the most amount of iron as from the nut and seed family. And a little quarter cup actually has 3 times the iron of a piece of steak. So great, iron source. Pistachios are a little bit lower calorie-wise, Brazil nuts, day's worth of selenium in a couple Brazil nuts. So all are fantastic. Just like I wouldn't go to the fruit family and go, you know what? Apples are the only fruit you guys should be eating. You'd probably look at me like, what? Is she a dietitian and she just said only eat apples? No, have strawberries, have blueberries, have cantaloupe, have honeydew, have grapes, have cherries, have peaches, have nectarines, have mangoes, have papaya. So by changing your options, you're actually maximizing your nutrition with hopefully getting the least amount of exposure and risk to, say, pesticides and chemicals and other things you might come across. So I love all natural almond butter and I love all natural peanut butter. Both are great. And you know what? By switching it up, you might not get bored of the same breakfast option again and again because you have a few options in the fridge. So natural is better, but of either two, I like both. And again, I don't calorie count because in the end, if you're listening to your body, it kind of evens itself out. So another habit I like to coach my clients on is building a better snack. And when most people think of a snack, they usually just think of one little part of a snack. So they bring like just an apple or just some almonds or just some yogurts. What I actually encourage you to do is bring a carb and a protein together because they work really, really well as a team. The carb gives you the little spike of gas, gives you your little bit of blood sugar to work with. The protein doesn't let the carb run up to the ceiling. So it keeps the carb more moderate and it's going to take a longer time for that carb to break down through your stomach and your intestines. So instead of just an apple as a snack, maybe do an apple and some almonds. Instead of just yogurt, maybe do yogurt and berries. So we're still trying to bring together two healthy foods together. Maybe it's a banana and peanut butter. Maybe it's some carrots dipped into some hummus. Maybe it's crackers and cheese. But the goal is to bring a carb and a protein together and actually build a little bit more into the morning snack and a little bit more into the afternoon snack. And you'll keep hearing me come back to our dinners are too large. They're too protein heavy. They're too starch heavy. They're too low veggie. So by allowing your snacks to get a little bit bigger, your dinner plate gets a little bit smaller. So this isn't a massive dinner plate. This is more like a salad or lunch-sized plate. We're dominating our dinner and our lunch with more vegetables, and we're getting a little bit smaller portion here and here. But we can't starve ourselves, so the snacks are the really important place that give you that energy boost mid-morning and that energy boost mid-afternoon. And I find when I get people snacking really effectively, their weight goes down and they get leaner and they have more energy and it's easier to exercise and easier to maintain body mass, lean body mass. So snacks are your friend when it comes to staying at a healthy weight. And ideally, what the snacks are doing is they're cutting down the time between when you have your last snack or last option of food. So here's where we want to really focus on eating every 3 to 4 hours. The longer you go without food, generally the more impulsive you're going to get the next time you eat. If it's been a long time without eating and you're really hungry, are you more likely to pick up food or make food over the course of an hour to do something homemade? If you're really hungry, it's kind of like eating under the influence of alcohol. You just stop caring about what's good for you long term and you start doing what you want to do in that moment. So to decrease impulsive eating, those snacks and eating every few hours are really, really beneficial. Because if I had a good afternoon snack, then I can come home from work and go, you know what? I don't need to eat crackers the second I get in the door, or Tostitos and salsa, or nibble on cheese off the cutting board, or grab a handful of chocolate chips out of my pantry, or eat peanut butter off the spoon. I say these examples because I've looked at hundreds and hundreds of food diaries, so I know what everyone does in private. And we've all been there, we've all done it. So with those snacks, they're going to let you come home, take a breath and go, okay, what's healthy? What can I make for dinner? Yeah, I could actually take 30 minutes to make something that's more nutritious because I'm not ravenous to eat, right this second in 10 minutes or less. So they're really, really important. With snacks, you don't want to be eating every hour on the hour. If you find that you're hungry every hour, you probably didn't have enough to eat the last time that you ate, or you maybe missed one of those two parts. Maybe you just had some carbs, but you didn't have the protein. So if I just had a peach at 10 o'clock, come back to me by 11:30 and I'm hungry again. But if I had a peach and say a little Greek yogurt, I'm good till maybe my lunch at 1 o'clock. Great. So that protein is going to help the snack last a little bit longer. If you're so full that you don't want to eat again for 6 or 8 hours, then you definitely overate. That's that feeling after like a Coors breakfast. You've gone out, you had way more than you should have had, and now on a Sunday you don't really feel like eating lunch because your breakfast was still too big. You want to decrease the portion size so that you feel comfortable and satisfied, and your great test of when you should stop eating is if I came around and I had a little piece of your absolutely favorite dessert, you would still have room to eat it. If you had to look at me and go, oh, I want that, but I just don't think I could eat it, you've definitely overeaten. So you should not feel full, uncomfortable, heavy, stuffed at the end of a meal. If that is your normal when you finish, you've eaten too much. You should feel comfortable, satisfied, not hungry, obviously, but not uncomfortable in any way. And so by eating more vegetables and not having as much of the calorie-dense carbs and protein, then you are going to be hungry again within 3 to 4 hours. So my clients that say, I don't really need snacks, I'm not hungry for them, are probably overeating at their meals, and that's why they're not hungry about every 3 hours for a snack. So you want to kind of play with the portion size so it generates hunger every few hours. And then you want to feed that hunger, not starve that hunger, so your metabolism works with you, not against you. From experience though, what I'm sharing and what I see is that when people tend to skip the snacks or when I get them to add them in, oh my gosh, does their dinners get better and their nighttime cravings get more under control and their energy levels go up during their workday. So I find from a physical standpoint of how people feel, they feel better when they eat more often. Now grazing every hour, I would agree, it's probably too much, it's too frequent. But again, some of you might feel best and still eat very nutritiously with 3 meals a day. And if that's the case, all the power to you. You found something that works for you, that's amazing. So you just got to find what's right, I think, for your situation, your body, your lifestyle. Some people have jobs that don't allow this to happen as easily. And as a quick point with, if you have a job where you're on your feet, you don't have a break, I have a lot of receptionists who always have people in their face, dental hygienists where they don't get breaks to go away. Sometimes they might have to tweak the snack and make it so that maybe they drink a smoothie for their afternoon snack. And it's in the fridge, they bring it to work, and throughout the afternoon, it's not a clear thermos, so they don't know what exactly it is that they're drinking, and they might have to drink their snack. As much as I said I don't love smoothies, I would rather have someone drink some nutrition during their workday than go all afternoon working and not taking some calories and some nourishment, and then come home starving and try eat a pre-dinner before dinner happens. So you have to be creative to your situation. I have people that do their snacks in the bathroom. It's a little bit silly, but they actually don't get breaks from their boss to go take a 5 to 10 minute break. So they sneak off to the washroom and they just bring their little, Ziploc baggie of veggies and crackers and hummus, and they eat that in the stall. Wash their hands before, wash their hands after, and back to work they go. So we found a creative solution that they took a 5-minute escape and they looked after their own needs. But if you don't look after yourself, your job isn't going to go, hey, I think it's a really good idea that you go take care of yourself right now. Get away from that screen, go for a walk, have a good snack. So our health is our responsibility. And if we don't take care of ourselves, we pay the price later, unfortunately, with chronic disease. So I say be a little bit selfish and fight to build those great habits into your day so that it's a regular thing and you found a solution so that it can happen fairly regularly. Okay, question, yeah.
I'm curious how you feel about soups. Sort of the same idea as smoothies.
I actually do like soups, especially if you can make them homemade or in a slow cooker. Where you have to be careful are the ones that can sit on the shelf for years and years because they're preserved in so much sodium and they have so little real protein and so few actual vegetables that it's more just like a sodium drink than it is a nutritious soup option. But yeah, homemade butternut squash soup in the fall, maybe homemade chicken noodle soup, all really, really good for you. And sometimes too, when you're not feeling great, especially when you're going through treatment, something softer like soup can really hit the spot versus a tough, fibrous, say, salad. So it's still a great option.
Better than smoothies. Do you like
I don't hate smoothies. I shouldn't say that. It's just if it's always your go-to in the morning, there can be better options as well to try. So I don't hate any food. No food is banned in my book. I'm okay with it all. Number 7, this is also kind of, if it's a great nutrition plan that's out there, it should be grounded in whole foods. If it's not, it should send a red flag of, if they're recommending all these things that you eat a bar and then drink a diet shake and then eat another bar, how sustainable is that long term? If we go back through all the ages, the common theme of health is eating real food. And this can be, again, adapted to different diets. Vegan diets are great if they focus on real foods. But vegan diets can be really unhealthy when it's processed vegan soy this and processed vegan chips and processed vegan that. Meat eating can be okay, but focused on real whole food and not deep fried chicken rings and racks of ribs out to here and battered fish, real whole protein. And same thing with real whole vegetables. So I'm a much bigger fan of eating real vegetables at dinner than adding veggie plus greens to your smoothie in the morning. They are not the same and they're not equal. Within the whole foods family though, it's really important that you focus on variety. So you might have those 10 superfoods you hear about all the time in the cancer world. Kale, spinach, goji berries, this, that, the other thing. Yeah, they're all great. But don't forget about little dandelion greens. Or what about green peppers or snow peas or zucchini? All dark green, all good for you. Just like my nut and seed example. Everyone knows almonds, everyone knows walnuts, but why not go for some pumpkin seeds as a morning snack for their iron? Or maybe some cashews because you like the taste of them and they're nutritious as well. So variety is really, really important. And this piece with whole foods is that they should go bad. Now eat them before they go bad. Don't give yourself food poisoning. But if it's something that's been in your kitchen for a long, long time, think about what that does inside your body. A little bit of a weird tangent, but I read an interesting paper about the rate that bodies decompose now in the ground. And bodies today decompose a lot slower than bodies in the past did, because we're so full of preservatives and chemicals and pesticides and everything else in our food that we actually don't go as bad in the ground as quickly. That's a little disturbing. I read another really interesting paper. Literally, we are what we take in from our environment. We are what we eat. This one was actually a study in former drug abusers who were cocaine and heroin addicts. And they had them on an exercise program. These were clean individuals to help them basically maintain their mood, find positive stress release without drug use, and live a healthier lifestyle. And what was actually happening is that they were starting to test positive for heroin in their blood, even though they weren't using, because as they were burning fat cells and breaking them down through exercise, those drugs had been stored in their body for a number of years, were getting released back into their bloodstream, and that was showing up. So when we actually look at what's inside of our tissues, everything you take in from your food, it has to go somewhere, and a lot of it does accumulate in our cells. So from a cancer standpoint, from a health standpoint, the more that it's real, and it's going to go bad because it's a real food, probably it's a good food to put inside yourself. If it's a food that can sit in your cupboard for 2 years and survive the zombie apocalypse, not such a good food, or not such a food so frequently. So I never really like to say foods are banned. I look at it more 80-20. 80% of the time, if what I eat is real and good for me, then I have a pretty good chance of coming out pretty healthy and feeling good and fit and at a good weight. And if 20% of the time I get to enjoy chips and pizza and chocolate and maybe some canned soup because it's easy one night, fantastic, because it makes my life convenient, allows me to still enjoy other foods, and I don't have to stress because it's not the majority of what I eat. So again, not going for perfection, but trying to make a change for the better.
I have a question about how you cook the vegetables. I've heard recently that microwaving takes out the nutrients. Is that true?
It does and it doesn't. Any form of heating will degrade any of the heat-sensitive nutrients. So some of the B vitamins and vitamin C don't do as well when you heat them. So when you heat vegetables, whether it's microwaving or steaming, you do lose a little bit of the B vitamins and some vitamin C. But you're also enhancing calcium and iron and magnesium and things like that. So there's always a bit of a trade-off. So that's why I like to have some vegetables raw and some heated and kind of change the heating method. Sometimes I steam in the stove, sometimes I microwave, sometimes I bake. Because again, I figure if you sort of diversify, it's kind of like financial planning. You know, if you put a little bit in the stock market and a little bit in the bank and maybe own a little bit of gold or silver and maybe you have a wad of cash under your bed just in case all the ATMs shut down, you're probably going to come out okay. Better than someone who puts all their eggs in one stock. So same kind of thing with nutrition. I think you'll come out the best if you do a little bit of this and that and not totally stop one behavior or totally buy into another. Because maybe we're wrong with our nutrition advice. I try to stay current, I try and stay on top of stuff, but I bet this talk in 20 years will evolve as long as I stay current with what's happening in the literature. So as professionals, we try our best to give the most up-to-date health message, but to be good providers, we need to change our message as we learn more about what food does inside of our body. So I think as consumers, by just testing the waters in a number of different areas and sticking with real food, you're probably going to come out the best in the end. Yes?
What about frozen foods?
Not all frozen foods are bad. So you can get amazing flash frozen fruits and veggies. And what that means is they've basically picked the fruit or the vegetable at its nutritional peak in the summertime when it's in season, and they immediately freeze it. And that is actually a great way to preserve the nutrition in that food. You actually get probably more nutrition from a frozen berry in the wintertime than you do from the stuff that's been shipped in from Argentina over thousands and thousands of kilometers. With frozen food, though, you have to just read the label carefully, because sometimes they'll put in more sodium and more sugar, too cheap preservatives, to make the food last longer. So not all frozen foods are bad. Just read the label carefully that there's no other added sauces or sugars or sodium, and a lot of frozen foods can be really nutritious. And again, they can come in really handy when you might not have a perfect dinner. So I have lots of clients who microwave those like stovetop kind of ready to go dinners. Not the best, not the worst, at least they're not picking up fast food, but it could still have maybe more vegetables to get to that half plate. So I often have them go 50-50 with the microwavable frozen dinner and 50% frozen veggies, and you just put it all in one pot, boil it, microwave it, whatever you need to do, stovetop, cook it to get it hot, and now you've just made that dinner a little bit better. So you're just looking for ways to use things that are helpful and convenient to still eat well, even in a non-ideal situation. Yeah. Okay. So number 8, omega-3 fats. Really, really great from a long-term health prevention standpoint. Without kind of beating this one to death, what you want to think about are the fish that are more that pinky red color. So that's going to be things like your salmon. But outside of salmon, tuna is high in omega-3. So is trout. So is mackerel. So is herring. So are sardines. So lots of options, not just salmon. If you're not a huge salmon or fish eater, then what you can do instead from a plant standpoint is things like ground flaxseed, walnuts, chia seeds, edamame, like unprocessed real soy. All of those are high omega-3 foods from the plant group. So if fish isn't your cup of tea, you can do it with plant foods as well. Lots and lots of benefits for our brain, our eye, our circulatory system, our memory, even depression and mood. So the more omega-3s, the better. Also, don't go fat-free. We want some healthy fats in the diet. We want to encourage more of the unprocessed fats, especially mono and polyunsaturated fats coming from plant and real animal foods. So that would be things like your avocados, your nuts and seeds, your salmon, for instance, plant-based oils. We don't want too much of the bad fat. And I'm not saying things like butter are banned. In some cases, I even think a little bit of butter's not a bad thing if it's just a little bit added to dinner to make it taste better. What we don't want is a lot of deep fried French fries, chicken wings, quesadillas, things like that. Ice cream, what do they just have at Western Fair? Deep fried Mars bars. Interesting to try, not great long term. Coconut I put on there as well. Although it's a saturated fat, it actually acts more like those healthy fats than the unhealthy fats. So if you're into coconut oil and you don't mind the taste of it, it's another great fat to add in replace, say, of a butter or, say, an olive oil or vegetable oil to saute vegetables. So another neat option that's out there. And last but not least, I think this is one of the biggest tips, pre-planning for success. So shopping with a grocery list, sticking to the grocery list, not buying the cookies because they're on sale at the front counter when you walk in. Another thing I have people do is something I call a snack bucket. Just like the veggie buckets in your fridge, your snack bucket is your go-to place in, say, your pantry or your work drawer or an overhead cubby in your cubicle where you just have some pre-portioned healthy snacks ready to go. Maybe you have some different containers of nuts and seeds. Maybe you have some just organic dried fruit. Maybe you have a little section of your fridge that's just little containers of hummus and yogurt and cheeses that you've done for the week. And you've got cantaloupe cut up in your fridge and some strawberries pre-sliced. Now you're in a position to put together a nutritious snack really quickly without that much effort. But when we don't pre-plan, our good intentions don't materialize into good actions. So it's great to think about it, but I'd rather you take a step to pre-plan and physically do something to set up your day than to plan out this grand scheme of how great your nutrition is going to be when these factors line up. So the more you can pre-plan, the more you can batch cook, have healthy options in the fridge and freezer, I promise you the easier that healthy eating becomes. But it's really hard to eat well when there's no groceries in the fridge, there's no snacks available to you when you're at work, you're really hungry, you're really tired, you're really stressed out. Healthy nutrition then isn't going to be as easy to put together. So those are just a few ideas. My takeaway from tonight is to pick one thing to start to do tonight, tomorrow, this week, right away that makes your diet a little bit better. Don't wait till Monday. The world does not reset on Monday. Nutrition does not start over Monday mornings. You have an opportunity tonight to maybe make a change. Maybe you can get an orange or a green vegetable into you. You can maybe go to bed with a lunch packed or some snacks packed if you go off to work and you need to bring food from home. Maybe you haven't had enough water to drink today, but you can finish your day with a big glass. Pick one thing from this list or anything about nutrition that can just get a little bit better, and stick with that for 2 to 3 weeks and make that your focus. If you try and change everything at once, all the balls come tumbling down. But if you nail one habit, get it right and stick with it, amazing. Now that's part of your everyday, it's not such a big deal. So maybe you might pick veggies on the plate first. Okay, I can do that for 3 weeks. Let's see how that goes. Great, that doesn't feel so hard. Then you move on to something differently. So does everyone have either on their sheet, circle it, star it, write themselves a little note? But my hope is that you'll commit to one positive improvement that you're maybe not doing this day, to this point, that you can just make a little bit better. Does that sound fair? Okay. So reminder, success is the sum of small efforts repeated day in and day out. It's no one amazing day. It's no one grand nutrition scheme. It's what you do day to day that matters. So day to day doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be moderately good to pretty good for you to get a result. You can be great for a week and terrible for 5 months, and the terrible for 5 months is going to override the one great week from January 1st to January 7th. So small efforts always beat the person that's planning and thinking of what they're going to do next. So online, what I've actually put on my website that's available to all of you as a free resource is I have a 30-day nutrition challenge. I'm going to preface it by saying I hate 30-day challenges, in the sense that this isn't a no caffeine, no alcohol, no eating out, all homemade food, all local, all organic. It's not one of those. It's not a crazy plan. It's one thing every day. It's a checklist to just get your diet a little bit better. So one day focuses on more water. One day has you do the veggie bucket. One day has you plan a nutritious snack in the morning and the afternoon. One day has you eating at the table with no distractions, no TV. So it's just 30 little days in a row of all positive steps you can do, and it's one thing a day. So I like that as a 30-day challenge because they're realistic, and you can jump the order if you need to, but it's 30 days of just making a little small improvement to your diet, and it's very, very manageable. So if that interests you, that's the link there, and I can give you my card and send it out to you by email. Okay, thank you so much for your participation tonight. And if anyone would like my contact info, it's just at the front.